The scream came first, then the fire. Elena Marsh woke up gasping, her hands already fighting off a blanket that was not attacking her. Sweat stuck her shirt to her back. The clock on the wall said 4 in the morning. Outside her window, the city of Ravenswood was quiet, cold, and covered in a thin fog that made the streetlights look like floating eyes. She had not dreamed about the barn in 3 months. She thought she was done with it. She was wrong. Elena was 24 years old now. She lived alone in a small apartment above a bakery, 2 towns away from the pack that raised her, married her off, and tried to break her. She worked as a waitress under a name that was not her birth name. She kept her hair short now, because long hair had once been something a man grabbed to hold her still. She did not own a single piece of jewelry, because rings reminded her of the ones she had been forced to wear when she was 16. She got out of bed and walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and stood at the window watching nothing. Her reflection stared back at her, thin and tired, but alive. Alive counted for a lot these days. At 16, Elena had not chosen anything. The pack elders chose for her. They said her blood was strong, that her mother's bloodline made her valuable, that marrying her to Garrick Thorne's son would bind 2 packs together and end a decade of quiet war. Nobody asked Elena if she wanted to end a war. Nobody asked her anything. She remembered the dress they put her in. She remembered the way her father would not look at her during the ceremony, because looking at her meant admitting what he had allowed. She remembered the vows said in a language older than the trees around the pack house, words she did not understand but was forced to repeat anyway. She remembered leaving that life 2 years later, at 18, running through the woods at night with nothing but a bag and a torn jacket, while the pack's warriors searched the roads for her. She remembered the moment she crossed the old stone marker that divided pack land from human land, and how she had collapsed right there, in the mud, and cried until she had nothing left. That part of her story was over. She did not let herself return to it often. Tonight was an exception, and she blamed the storm outside for stirring something loose in her chest. She finished her water, went back to bed, and told herself the same thing she always told herself. That girl is gone. I am someone else now. She almost believed it. 300 miles north, in a city called Ashfall, a man named Damon Ashcroft stood on the roof of a 20-story building that belonged to his family, watching the sun rise over a skyline that answered to him. Damon was not just a businessman. He was the Alpha King, the highest authority among the northern packs, a title inherited through blood and proven through blood as well. Men feared him. Women wanted him. Neither fact interested him much anymore. He had spent the last 6 years cleaning up messes his father left behind, corrupt pack leaders, broken alliances, deals made in blood that never should have been signed. Damon was good at fixing things. He was less good at feeling things, and he knew it. His second in command, a broad-shouldered man named Caleb Whitmore, joined him on the roof holding 2 cups of coffee. "You're up early," Caleb said. "Didn't sleep." "You never sleep." Damon took the coffee without answering. Down below, cars moved through the streets like blood through veins, and for a moment he allowed himself to feel the quiet satisfaction of a system running the way it should. It did not last. "We got a report last night," Caleb said, "from the Eastern Territories. Pack called Thorne." Damon's jaw tightened, just slightly. The Thorne pack had a reputation, and not a good one. "What kind of report?" "A missing person case that isn't so missing. Old records surfaced. Something about a forced marriage, 7, 8 years back. A girl. 16 at the time. The pack buried it well, but a rival pack dug it up to use as leverage in a border dispute." Damon set his coffee down on the ledge. "Buried how?" "Payoffs. Silence orders. The usual." Caleb hesitated. "They're using it against Thorne. They want you to rule on it at the summit next month. Public record, public shame. Could break Thorne's alliance completely." Damon looked out at the city again, but he no longer saw it the same way. As Alpha King, disputes crossed his desk daily. Land grabs, broken contracts, small wars over pride. This one was different. This one had a name attached, buried beneath layers of pack law and years of silence. "Do we know the girl's name?" he asked. Caleb checked his tablet. "Elena Thorne. Well, she took the Thorne name in the marriage. Before that, she was Elena Marsh." Damon repeated the name once, quietly, like testing the weight of it. "Find her," he said, "before the summit. I want to hear this from her, not from a file." "Sir, that's a lot of digging for a border dispute." Damon turned to face him, and something in his eyes made Caleb straighten without meaning to. "It stopped being a border dispute the moment I heard the word 16, Damon said. "Find her." Elena's shift at the diner started at 7. She poured coffee, took orders, smiled at strangers who tipped badly, and existed in the specific kind of peace that comes from being unremarkable. Unremarkable was safe. Unremarkable meant no one asked questions. Around noon, a man in an expensive coat walked in, sat at the corner booth, and ordered black coffee. He did not look like he belonged in a diner with cracked vinyl seats and a jukebox that only half worked. He had the kind of stillness that made the whole room feel like it was holding its breath, though nobody else seemed to notice it but her. Elena noticed it because her body noticed danger before her mind did. Years of training had made her that way. She brought his coffee over. "Anything else?" she asked, professional, distant. "Just information," the man said. His voice was calm even, but there was authority stitched into every word, the kind that did not need to be raised to be obeyed. "Are you Elena Marsh?" Every muscle in her body went still. "You've got the wrong person," she said. "I don't think I do." She set the coffee pot down harder than she meant to. "Who are you?" "My name is Caleb Whitmore. I work for the Alpha King." The words hit her like cold water. She had spent 6 years running from anyone connected to pack law, and now here one sat, in her diner, in her town, saying her real name out loud like it was nothing. "I don't know any Alpha King," she said, backing up a step. "I don't know any packs. I'm human. I'm nobody." "Elena," his tone gentled, just slightly. "Nobody's here to hurt you. The opposite, actually. Something's come up. Something about your past. The king wants to speak with you himself before it becomes a public matter." Public matter. She almost laughed, and it came out sharp and humorless. "You mean the thing they did to me is being used as a bargaining chip? Again." Caleb didn't deny it. "Yes." Elena's hands were shaking now, and she hated that they were. She placed them flat on the table to stop it. "I built a life," she said quietly. "I have a name. I have a job. I sleep through most nights now. I am not going back to being a story people trade like currency." "I understand." "You don't." Her voice cracked slightly. "You really don't." Caleb studied her for a moment, something like respect passing over his face. "The king asked me to find you before the summit, not drag you into anything. Just talk. He said if it stopped being a border dispute the moment he heard your age, then it deserves to be handled by a person, not a file." Elena stared at him, unsure whether to feel afraid or oddly, dangerously hopeful. "And if I say no?" "Then I go back and tell him no. That's it. Nobody touches you. Nobody forces anything. Not while the Alpha King is the one asking." She wanted to believe that promises from powerful men meant something. Her whole life had taught her they usually didn't. But there was something in the steadiness of this man's voice that made the old, buried part of her, the part that used to hope, lift its head, just slightly, for the first time in years. "I need to think," she said. "Take the time you need." Caleb placed a card on the table, plain, with only a number on it. "But Elena, for what it's worth, the king doesn't chase small things. If he's asking, it's because he already decided your story matters more than the politics wrapped around it." He left without finishing his coffee. Elena stood alone in the diner, staring at the small white card like it might catch fire in her hand. Outside, the fog from that morning had not yet cleared, and for the first time in 6 years, the past she had buried was standing at her front door, asking to be let in. She did not know yet that the man asking, the Alpha King himself, was about to learn exactly what his own kind had taken from her, and that once he knew, he would not let it go unanswered. That night, she called the number on the card. 3 days later, Elena stood outside a tall glass building in Ashfall, wearing the only formal coat she owned, feeling smaller than she had in years. Caleb met her at the entrance and walked her up in silence, sensing she needed it. The office at the top floor was simple, not flashy, which surprised her. She expected marble and gold. Instead, she found dark wood, quiet lighting, and a man standing at the window with his back to her, tall, still, dressed like someone who had learned long ago that power did not need to shout. "Elena Marsh," he said, without turning around. "Thank you for coming. I almost didn't." "I know." He turned then, and for a moment neither of them said anything. His eyes were sharp, assessing, but not unkind. "I read the file. I want you to know something before we start." "What's that?" "I am not here to relive what happened to you for the sake of politics," Damon said. "I am here because a 16-year-old girl was married against her will, under laws I am supposed to enforce fairly, and instead they were used to hide her, silence her, and erase her. That is not something I can look away from, summit or no summit." Elena's throat tightened. Nobody in a position of power had ever spoken to her like her pain was the point, rather than the inconvenience. "Why does it matter to you?" she asked, quieter than she meant to. Damon's jaw flexed, some old anger of his own surfacing briefly before he controlled it. Because the law protected the people who hurt you instead of protecting you, he said. And I intend to find out exactly how deep that failure goes. Elena did not know yet that this conversation would unravel years of buried secrets, expose a pack built on cruelty disguised as tradition, and force both of them to face things neither was ready for. She only knew, standing in that quiet office, that for the first time since she was 16 years old, someone with real power was choosing to stand on her side. It would not be simple, it would not be easy, but it was, finally, a beginning. Elena did not sleep that night. She sat in the small guest room Damon's staff had arranged for her, staring at the ceiling, replaying his words over and over. The law protected the people who hurt you instead of protecting you. Nobody had ever said that to her out loud, not once. Not her mother, not the healer who stitched her arm after the second year of the marriage, not the pack elders who signed the papers that bound her to Garrick Thorne's son like she was property changing hands. She got up before dawn and found the kitchen on the residence floor, mostly because she did not know what else to do with her hands. A woman was already there, older, with silver-streaked hair and flour on her apron. "You must be the girl from the file," the woman said, not unkindly. "I'm Nora. I run this kitchen and most of this house, whether anyone asked me to or not." "Elena." "I know your name, sweetheart. Sit down before you fall down." Elena sat. Nora placed a plate in front of her without asking what she wanted, the way people do when they have fed enough scared young women to know food helps before words do. "You're wondering if he means it," Nora said. "The king." Elena looked up, startled. "Everybody wonders that," Nora continued, stirring something on the stove. "He doesn't say things he doesn't mean. Problem is, most people who come through that door have been lied to so many times they can't tell the difference anymore between a man who means it and a man who's good at sounding like he does." "Which one is he?" Nora considered the question seriously. "The kind who loses sleep over paperwork with a girl's name on it. I've worked for his family since before he was born. His father was not a good man. Damon spent his whole life trying not to become him. That's not nothing." Elena ate slowly, letting that settle. Damon spent the early morning with Caleb going through everything the investigators had pulled from Thorne Pack records. Most of it was what he expected. Falsified consent documents, a marriage contract signed by elders instead of the bride, medical records that had been altered to remove certain visits entirely. "There's more," Caleb said, sliding a folder across the desk. "After she ran, they filed a formal grievance against her, called it abandonment of pack duty. If she's ever caught inside pack territory again, by their own law, they can detain her." Damon's hand flattened against the folder like he wanted to crush it. "That law is meant for warriors who desert during conflict," he said, "not for a girl running from an arranged cage. Technically, it applies broadly enough that Thorne's lawyers made it stick on paper. That's the kind of thing that gets buried until somebody needs it as leverage." "Which is exactly what's happening now." Caleb nodded. "The pack pushing this into the open, the one using it against Thorne, they don't care about Elena. They want Thorne humiliated at the summit to weaken their standing. Elena's just the weapon they found lying around." Damon closed the folder, quiet for a long moment. "She's not a weapon," he said. "She's the only person in this entire mess who never got a say in anything that happened to her. That changes today. What are you planning?" "I'm going to make sure that when this comes to the summit, it isn't Thorne's shame on trial. It's going to be the law itself, the one that let this happen, and is still sitting on the books, ready to happen to somebody else." Caleb studied him. "That's not a small fight, Damon. That's rewriting pack law in front of every alpha in the North." "Good," Damon said. "It's overdue." Later that day, Damon found Elena in the library on the second floor, sitting near the window, a book open on her lap that she was not actually reading. She closed it when she saw him. "Your cook makes very good eggs," she said, an attempt at lightness that did not quite land. "Nora spoils everyone. It's her one flaw." He sat across from her, keeping distance, letting her set the pace of the conversation. "I want to ask you something, and you can say no." Elena tensed slightly. "Ask." "The summit is in 3 weeks. I intend to challenge the law that allowed your marriage to happen, and the one that lets Thorne Pack threaten to detain you if you ever cross pack land again. I can do this without you. It would be slower, weaker, and easier for them to dismiss, or you could stand there yourself and tell them what happened, in your own words, and it becomes very hard for anyone in that room to look away. You want me to tell a room full of alphas the worst thing that ever happened to me. I want you to have the choice to," Damon said. "Nobody in your life ever gave you that. I'm not going to be one more person who doesn't." Elena looked down at the book in her lap, running her thumb along its spine. They'll say I ran because I was weak, she said quietly. That's what they told everyone, that I couldn't handle the honor they gave me. They'll say a lot of things, Damon said. None of them will be true, and I intend to make sure everyone in that room knows it. Something in Elena's chest loosened, just slightly, the way a knot gives, before it fully comes undone. I need time, she said. You have 3 weeks. That's not very much time. No, Damon agreed. But it's more than they ever gave you. Elena almost smiled. It surprised her more than it surprised him. That night, Elena dreamed of the barn again, but this time it played differently. She saw herself at 16, standing in the doorway in the dress they made her wear, and instead of her father refusing to look at her, she saw a different figure standing at the far end of the barn, tall and still, watching with an expression she had never once seen directed at her before. Recognition, without judgment. She woke up before dawn again, but this time the fear in her chest had shifted into something else entirely, something closer to resolve. She found Damon in his office before the household was fully awake, still in yesterday's clothes, clearly having not slept either. I'll do it, she said. The summit. I'll stand there. Damon looked up from his desk, and for the first time since she had met him, something in his controlled expression cracked open into surprise, and beneath the surprise, something that looked almost like relief. Are you certain? No, Elena said honestly, but I'm tired of being certain about nothing except how to disappear. I want to be certain about something else for once. Damon rose from his desk and crossed the room, stopping a respectful distance away. Then we prepare, he said. And Elena, whatever happens in that room, you will not stand there alone. I give you my word. She studied his face for a long moment, searching for the lie she had learned to expect from powerful men. She did not find one. All right, she said. Let's begin. The knock on the apartment door came at midnight, 3 towns away, in the building above the bakery where Elena used to live. The landlord, an older man named Silas, answered it because he still had a spare key and a habit of checking on tenants who left in a hurry. The man at the door was young, sharp-jawed, dressed in a coat too fine for the neighborhood. He smiled the way people smile when they already know the answer to the question they are about to ask. I'm looking for a woman who used to rent this unit, he said. Elena, goes by Marsh now, I believe. Silas had spent 40 years learning to read people, and everything about this one set off a quiet alarm. Don't know her, Silas said. That's strange, the man said, still smiling. Because her mail still comes here, and because my father has been looking for her for 6 years, and I intend to be the one who finally brings her home. Home, Silas repeated flatly. She's my wife, the man said. Whatever she's told people, that has never changed. Marriage bonds don't expire because a person runs. Silas closed the door in his face, but his hands were shaking as he did it. He called the only number Elena had left him, an emergency contact she had given him in case anything ever went wrong. It rang through to Caleb Whitmore's phone at the Ashcroft residence 300 miles away. Damon received the call at 2 in the morning. He was already awake, reviewing PAC law with a legal advisor, preparing arguments for the summit. Caleb relayed what Silas had described, and Damon's expression went very still, very controlled, in the specific way that Caleb had learned meant real danger was close. Garrick Thorne's son, Damon said. Rhett. Sounds like it. He's making a move before the summit. He wants her found and brought back on his terms, so whatever happens in that room, he can claim she came back willingly, or claim she never really left at all. Do we move her? Damon was already standing, already reaching for his coat. I'll go myself. Damon, you're the Alpha King, you don't personally. I do this time. Elena was asleep in the guest room when Damon knocked softly and told her what happened. She sat up fast, pulling the blanket against her chest like armor, old instinct taking over before her mind caught up. He knows I'm alive, she said. He knows where I was. He knows where you were, Damon corrected. Not where you are. That's different, and it stays different. You don't know him. Her voice had gone thin, stretched tight over something old and raw. Rhett doesn't stop. He never stopped. Not once. Not for 2 years. I know enough, Damon said. I know he just made the mistake of confirming, in front of a witness, that he intends to violate Summit Protocol by trying to retrieve you before any ruling is made. That is not a small mistake. That is something I can use. Elena stared at him. You're already turning this into strategy. I'm turning this into protection, Damon said. The two aren't always separate, not in my world. But Elena, look at me. She did. He does not get near you, Damon said, each word deliberate. Not before the summit, not after. Not while I am standing. For a moment, Neither of them spoke. The room held the kind of silence that comes after fear meets something sturdy enough to lean against. "Why do you care this much?" Elena asked finally, quietly, almost afraid of the answer. "I'm a case file to the rest of the world, a political weapon to Thorne's enemies. What am I to you?" Damon was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words with unusual care. "You're the first person I've met in years who didn't ask me for anything," he said. "Not protection, not favor, not alliance. You just wanted to be left alone to survive. That's rare, in my world. People confuse rare for valuable, far too late, usually after they've already lost it. I don't intend to make that mistake." Elena's eyes stung, unexpectedly, and she looked away before he could see it clearly. "I don't know how to be anyone's priority," she admitted. "I've spent 6 years making sure I wasn't anyone's anything." "You don't have to know how yet," Damon said gently. "You just have to let it happen without running from it." 2 days later, security around the Ashcroft residence tightened without explanation to the outside world. Officially, nothing had changed. Unofficially, Caleb doubled patrols, rerouted Elena's movements through private corridors, and made certain no photograph of her existed anywhere Rhett Thorne's people could find. Elena, for her part, began training again, something she had let go of during her years of hiding. An older warrior on Damon's staff named Grace, quiet and precise, taught her basic defense in the mornings before the household woke. "You used to know some of this," Grace observed on the third morning, watching Elena block a strike with more instinct than technique. "A lifetime ago," Elena said, "before I decided disappearing was safer than fighting." "Disappearing worked for 6 years," Grace said. "It's not working anymore. Might as well learn to stand instead of just run." Elena absorbed that, sweat cooling on her skin, muscles remembering things her mind had tried to forget. "Grace," she said, "do you think I can actually win this, at the summit?" Grace considered the question seriously, the way she considered everything. "I think the king doesn't fight battles he plans to lose," she said. "And I think you've already survived the hardest part. Standing in a room and saying the truth out loud is difficult, but it isn't the same as surviving what you survived to get there. You already did the hard part once. This is just finishing it." Elena nodded slowly, something steadying inside her chest. That evening, a courier arrived at the residence with a sealed letter addressed to Damon personally. He opened it in his office, Caleb standing nearby, and his expression darkened as he read. "What is it?" Caleb asked. Damon set the letter down, jaw tight. "Rhett Thorne," he said, "formally requesting an audience before the summit. He wants to present his own case first. Claims Elena abandoned her marriage vows and pact duty without cause, and that whatever she says at the summit is the word of a woman who broke sacred law. That's a direct challenge. It's more than that." Damon's voice was low. Controlled anger threaded through every syllable. "It's an attempt to speak for her before she gets the chance to speak for herself. He wants to define her story before she can tell it." "What do we do?" Damon looked toward the window, toward the direction of Elena's room upstairs, where she was, for the first time in years, sleeping without nightmares. "We make sure that request is denied," he said, "and we make sure that when Elena Marsh finally speaks in that hall, Rhett Thorne is sitting in the audience, silent, listening to every word he tried to erase." The request was denied within a day. Damon made certain of it personally, sending word through formal channels that no party could address the Summit Council before the scheduled hearing, and that any attempt to do so outside proper process would be treated as a violation of Summit law itself. It was a small victory, but Elena felt the weight of it lift something in her shoulders she had not realized was there. Still, denial did not mean silence. 2 days later, word reached the residence that Rhett Thorne had begun speaking to smaller packs across the territory, framing the story his own way, before Elena ever opened her mouth in front of the council. He called her unstable. He called her a runaway who invented grievances to escape duty. He called himself patient, wronged, and still hopeful she would come home. Elena read the reports Caleb brought her, sitting very still at the kitchen table, while Nora quietly refilled her tea without being asked. "He's good at this," Elena said finally. "He always was. He can say something cruel and make it sound like concern. He did it for 2 years, and nobody outside that house ever questioned him." "People will question him now," Nora said. "The king doesn't let lies sit unchallenged for long. Never has." Elena wrapped her hands around the warm cup, grounding herself in the simple heat of it. "I used to think if I ever told anyone the truth, they would say I deserved it," she admitted quietly. "That I made him angry. That I didn't try hard enough to be what the marriage needed. That's what the elders told me, every time." Nora's expression sharpened, though her voice stayed gentle. That's what people say when they need you to carry the blame instead of the ones responsible. It was never yours to carry, sweetheart. It still isn't. Elena looked up, eyes bright with something between grief and disbelief. Nobody had told her that so plainly before. It landed somewhere deep, somewhere that had been waiting years to hear it. That afternoon, Damon called a meeting with his senior advisors to prepare formal arguments for the summit. Elena was invited to sit in, not required, but invited, which she noticed and appreciated more than she said aloud. The advisors were sharp and methodical, laying out precedent, law, and procedure with the calm precision of people who had done this 100 times. But it was Damon's closing statement that stayed with her. "This is not simply about one marriage," he said, addressing the room though his eyes briefly found Elena's. "It is about a law old enough to have outlived its purpose. A law that allows elders to sign away a person's future in the name of alliance, without ever asking that person what they want. Elena Marsh is not an isolated case. She is a symptom of a system that has been quietly failing its most vulnerable members for generations. If we do not correct it now, we will simply wait for the next girl, the next family, the next silence bought and paid for." Silence followed his words, heavy and considering. One of the older advisors, a stern woman named Ivy Callahan, who had served 3 Alpha Kings before Damon, finally spoke. "Bold words for a summit that has never once overturned a marriage law in 300 years, she said. "The other Alphas will resist. Change threatens tradition, and tradition is the currency most of them trade in. Then we give them a new currency," Damon said. "Truth, spoken plainly, by someone who lived it. That is harder to dismiss than any legal argument I could construct alone." Ivy's gaze shifted to Elena, assessing, not unkind but not soft either. "Are you prepared for that, girl?" she asked. "Because half that room will look for any excuse to call you unstable, ungrateful, or worse. They will not all be gentle." Elena met her eyes steadily, surprising herself with how solid her voice came out. "I have already survived worse than unkind words in a room. I can survive that too." Something shifted in Ivy's expression, respect settling into the lines of her face. "Then perhaps this summit will be worth attending after all," she said. That evening, Damon found Elena on the back terrace, watching the sun go down over the training yard, where she had spent the morning sparring with Grace. He joined her without asking, leaning against the railing a respectful distance away. "You didn't have to sit in on that meeting," he said. "It wasn't required. I wanted to hear how you'd fight for this," Elena said. "I think I needed to hear it, actually. For years I imagined what it would sound like if someone finally said all of this out loud, and it never sounded quite like what you said today." "How did you imagine it?" "Smaller," she admitted. "Quieter. Like it might not survive being spoken. What you said in there, it sounded like it could actually change something." Damon studied her profile in the fading light, something careful and unhurried in his expression. "It can," he said, "but only because you're the one standing behind it. Law changes on paper all the time and means nothing. It changes for real when someone refuses to be erased by it anymore." Elena turned to look at him fully then, something unguarded crossing her face for just a moment. "I keep waiting for you to want something from me," she said quietly. "Everyone in my life who ever offered protection wanted something eventually. I don't know how to trust that you don't." Damon did not move closer, did not press, simply held her gaze with the same steadiness he had shown since the first day she walked into his office. "I want the law fixed," he said honestly. "I want Rhett Thorne and every elder who signed that contract to answer for it. And yes, Elena, I want to know the woman standing in front of me, the one who survived all of it and still has enough left in her to fight. That's not nothing, but it's not a demand either. It's just true." Elena did not answer right away. The silence between them was not uncomfortable, only full, the way silence gets when two people are both quietly deciding whether to trust something fragile and new. "Okay," she said finally, softer than before. "Okay." Neither of them said more than that. It was enough. 3 days later, a message arrived that changed the shape of everything again. A courier delivered it directly to Damon, marked urgent, sealed with the crest of the Thorne pack. Inside was a single page. Rhett Thorne had requested, through official summit channels this time, that his father Garrick Thorne be permitted to testify alongside him, claiming new evidence that would, in his words, restore the truth about what really happened 8 years ago. Damon read it twice before setting it down, his expression unreadable. "They're not just defending the marriage anymore," he said quietly. "They're preparing to attack her credibility directly, in front of the entire council." Elena, standing nearby when the letter arrived, felt the old fear rise fast and cold in her chest, the same fear that used to send her running through dark woods at 18 years old. This time, she did not run. Then we prepare for that too, she said, steadier than she felt. Whatever they bring, I'll be ready for it. Damon looked at her for a long moment, something like pride settling quietly behind his eyes. Yes, he said, we will be. Garrick Thorne's name alone was enough to change the air in a room. Elena had not seen him in 6 years, not since the night she climbed out a window and ran through wet grass until her lungs burned, but she remembered his voice with perfect, unwelcome clarity. He had a way of speaking softly that was somehow worse than shouting, a calm that always came right before something broke. Caleb pulled together everything the investigators had on him within a day. Garrick was 71 years old, Pack Alpha for over 4 decades, respected by older packs for holding territory through 3 wars. Respected, Damon noted grimly, by people who had never asked what happened behind his walls to maintain that respect. He's going to play the wounded patriarch, Caleb said, laying out the strategy notes on Damon's desk. Wronged elder, betrayed by a daughter-in-law who abandoned tradition. He'll talk about honor and legacy. He's very good in front of a crowd. So am I, Damon said simply. Elena sat across from them, arms crossed, listening more than speaking, which had become her way of preparing for things that frightened her. She had learned long ago that silence let her watch people's strategies unfold before she had to respond to them. There's something you should know about him, she said finally. Something that never made it into any file, because nobody outside that house ever saw it. Both men turned to her. He didn't just allow the marriage, Elena said, voice low but steady. He designed it. Rhett was never going to say no to his father, not once, not ever. Garrick picked me, specifically, because my mother's bloodline made the alliance stronger, and because I was quiet enough as a teenager that he assumed I would never make trouble. He told me that himself, once, like it was a compliment. The room went still. He told you that, Damon repeated carefully, and expected you to be grateful. He expected me to disappear into it, Elena said. Most girls in that position do. I think that's what makes him so dangerous at the summit. He's used to being right about people staying quiet. Damon's expression hardened into something controlled but sharp. Then we make sure he's wrong this time. Preparation consumed the following week. Elena worked with Ivy Callahan on summit procedure, learning exactly how testimony would be structured, when she could speak, when she would be interrupted, how the Council of Alphas typically weighed evidence against tradition. It was exhausting, technical work, but it gave her something concrete to hold on to instead of fear. In the evenings, she trained with Grace, and slowly, the movements that once felt foreign to her returned like a language she had only forgotten, not lost. She was not becoming a warrior, she did not need to be, but she was becoming someone who no longer flinched at the memory of a raised hand, and that alone felt like its own kind of victory. Damon watched all of this from a careful distance, present but not overbearing, available but never demanding her attention. It was a kind of respect Elena had never experienced from anyone in a position of power, and it unsettled her at first, the absence of expectation. She kept waiting for the version of him that wanted something in return. It never arrived. One night, after a long session with Ivy that left her drained, Elena found Damon alone in the library, a glass of untouched water beside him, papers spread across the table. You work as much as I train, she observed, sitting across from him. Bad habit, Damon admitted. My father worked constantly too. I told myself for years I was nothing like him. Then one day I realized I inherited his habits without meaning to, just not his cruelty. What was he like? Elena asked. Your father. Damon's expression grew distant, the careful control he wore like armor slipping just slightly. Feared, he said, not respected. There's a difference, though most people confuse the two. He built alliances through threat instead of trust. I spent my whole childhood watching people smile at him and mean none of it. He paused. I promised myself I would build something different, something people didn't have to fear to respect. Is that why this matters so much to you? Elena asked quietly. My case. It's not just about fixing a law, is it? Damon met her eyes, something unguarded there for the first time since she had known him. No, he admitted. It's about proving to myself that the kind of power my father used to break people can be used instead to protect them. I don't know if that makes sense. It does, Elena said softly. More than you probably realize. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the papers between them forgotten, the quiet between two people who had both spent years surviving something they never chose. Elena, Damon said eventually, whatever happens at the summit, win or lose the legal argument, I want you to know something. What's that? You already won the moment you decided to stop hiding, he said. Everything else is just the world catching up to that. Elena's eyes stung, unexpected warmth spreading through her chest, something she had not let herself feel in a very long time. "Thank you," she whispered. Neither of them moved to close the distance between them that night. It was not yet time, but something had shifted, quiet and certain, settling into the space between two people who were slowly, carefully, learning to trust again. 2 days before the summit, a message arrived that neither of them expected. It came not from Thorn, but from a name Elena had not heard in years, her own mother. The letter was short, written in careful, uncertain handwriting. "I heard you were found. I heard what is happening. I should have said something 8 years ago, and my silence has haunted me every day since. If you will let me, I would like to stand beside you at the summit and tell the council what I saw and what I allowed. You do not have to forgive me. I only want the truth to have every voice it needs." Elena read it 3 times, hands trembling, before she looked up at Damon, who had been waiting quietly nearby while she read. "My mother wants to testify," she said, voice caught somewhere between disbelief and old, complicated grief. "After everything, after years of nothing, she wants to stand up there with me." "Do you want her to?" Damon asked gently. No pressure in the question at all. Elena was quiet for a long moment, feeling the old ache of abandonment sit uneasily beside a fragile, unexpected hope. "I don't know yet," she admitted, "but I think I want to hear what she has to say before the summit decides for both of us." "Then we'll arrange it," Damon said simply. "Whatever you need." Elena folded the letter carefully, holding it like something both fragile and dangerous, unsure yet whether it was a gift or one more wound waiting to reopen. But for the first time, she felt something she had not expected to feel walking into all of this. She felt surrounded, rather than alone. 2 days remained until the summit, and for better or worse, everything was about to come into the light. Elena's mother arrived the next morning, escorted quietly by 2 of Damon's staff to avoid drawing attention from anyone watching the residence. Her name was Margaret, and she looked older than Elena remembered, smaller somehow, as though the years since the marriage had folded something inward in her. They met in the small sitting room off the library, Damon deliberately absent to give them privacy, though Grace stood watch outside the door in case Elena needed anything. Margaret stood when Elena entered, hands twisting together, uncertain whether she was allowed to move closer. "You look well," Margaret said finally, voice trembling. "You look healthy. I wasn't sure I'd ever see that again." Elena stayed near the door, unwilling yet to close the distance between them. "You could have looked for me sooner." "I was afraid," Margaret admitted, "of your father, of Garrick, of what would happen to the rest of our family if I went looking for a daughter everyone had been told to consider gone. That fear does not excuse what I did. Nothing excuses it. I only want you to know I understand that." Elena's jaw tightened, old anger rising fast and familiar. "Do you know what happened to me in that house, Mother? Do you actually know? Or did you just assume it was fine because nobody screamed loud enough for you to hear it?" Margaret's face crumpled, grief breaking through the careful composure she had arrived with. "I knew enough," she whispered. "I knew enough to be ashamed every single day since. I told myself the alliance mattered more than my discomfort with it. I was wrong. I have been wrong for 8 years, and I do not expect you to forgive that. I only wanted the chance to say it to your face before I said it to a room full of strangers." Silence stretched between them, heavy with years neither could return. "Why do you want to testify?" Elena asked finally, quieter now. "What do you get out of standing in that room?" "Nothing," Margaret said. "There is nothing left for me to gain. I want to testify because you deserve every voice available to you, and mine is one I withheld far too long. If it helps even slightly, I want to give it now, regardless of what it costs me with your father, or with Garrick's allies." Elena studied her mother's face for a long moment, searching for the manipulation she had learned to expect from everyone connected to that old life. She found only exhaustion and grief, and something that looked uncomfortably like genuine remorse. "I need to think about it," Elena said. "I'm not ready to decide yet." "That's fair," Margaret said quickly. "Take whatever time you need. I'll be here, if you want me, and if you don't, I'll understand that too." Elena left the room without embracing her, without forgiveness, but also without the door fully closed. It was, she realized, more than she thought she would be able to give. That evening, Elena found Damon on the terrace again, the same spot where they had spoken days before. She told him about the conversation with her mother, the anger, the uncertain grief, the offer still sitting unresolved between them. "What do you think I should do?" she asked. "I think it's not my decision to make," Damon said carefully. "But if you're asking what I observed, your mother came here without protection, without her husband's permission. likely at real risk to her own standing within the pack. That doesn't undo 8 years of silence. But it isn't nothing either. Elena wrapped her arms around herself, staring out at the darkening yard. I don't know how to hold both things at once. The anger and the maybe forgiveness. It feels like admitting one cancels out the other. It doesn't, Damon said gently. You can be furious with someone and still let them stand beside you. Those aren't contradictions, Elena. They're just complicated, the way most real things are. She looked at him, something loosening slightly in her chest at the simplicity of the permission he was offering. Permission she had not realized she needed. I think I want her there, Elena said slowly, testing the words as she spoke them. Not because I've forgiven her. Because I'm tired of being the only one who has to carry the truth of what happened. If she's finally willing to carry some of it too, I don't see why I should stop her. Then we'll prepare her testimony alongside yours, Damon said. Carefully, Ivy can help make sure nothing said in that room can be twisted against either of you. Elena nodded, some of the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. Damon, she said after a moment. Thank you for not telling me what to do. Everyone else in my life always did. My father, the elders, Rhett, all of them always knew exactly what I should think and feel. You're the first person who's just let me figure it out myself. Damon's expression softened in the low evening light. You've had enough people decide things for you, Elena. I'm not interested in becoming one more. The following day, disturbing news reached the residence through one of Caleb's contacts inside Thorn territory. Rhett had learned of Margaret's visit to Ashfall, and had responded by pressuring her husband, Elena's father, to publicly disown Margaret's testimony before it could even be delivered, framing her as an unstable woman, acting without her husband's consent. They're trying to discredit her before she says a word, Caleb reported. Standard Thorn strategy. Attack the messenger before the message ever lands. Damon's jaw tightened. Then we make sure her testimony stands on its own, regardless of what her husband says about her afterward. Ivy, can we submit written corroboration alongside her verbal statement? Something that can't be dismissed as one woman's unstable claim? Ivy nodded slowly. If we can find even one more witness from inside that household, a healer, a servant, anyone who saw what happened during those 2 years, it becomes much harder for Thorn to frame this as a single unreliable account. Elena, listening quietly from the corner of the room, felt something settle into place. I know someone, she said, the healer, who used to treat me. Her name was Ivy Callahan's cousin, actually, I believe. Ivy, your family runs deep in that territory too, doesn't it? Ivy's eyes sharpened with sudden recognition. My cousin Delphine served as pack healer for Thorn territory for over a decade. I hadn't made the connection until now. She saw everything, Elena said quietly. She stitched wounds she never should have had to stitch. If anyone would be willing to speak the truth, even at risk to herself, I think it might be her. Damon looked between Elena and Ivy, something resolute settling into his expression. Then we find her, he said, quietly, carefully, and quickly. The summit is 1 day away, and I intend to walk into that hall with every piece of truth this family has spent 8 years trying to bury. The room fell into focused, urgent motion, plans forming rapidly around a single shared purpose. Elena stood at the center of it, no longer the frightened girl who had run through wet grass 8 years ago, but not yet fully the woman she was becoming either. Tomorrow, all of it would come to a head. Tonight, there was only preparation, and the fragile, unfamiliar comfort of not facing any of it alone. Delphine was found by midday, living quietly in a small village bordering Thorn territory, having left her position as pack healer 3 years earlier, under circumstances she had never fully explained to anyone. When Caleb located her and explained why they had come, she went very pale, and for a long moment said nothing at all. I wondered if this day would come, she said finally, wiping flour from her hands onto her apron, an odd echo of Nora's kitchen back at the residence. I left Thorn territory because I could not keep pretending the things I saw were normal. I assumed no one would ever ask me to say so out loud. Someone's asking now, Caleb said gently. Elena Marsh is testifying at tomorrow's summit. She remembered you. She said you were the only kindness she had in that house. Delphine's eyes filled, old grief surfacing fast. I wanted to do more for her. I wanted to help her leave sooner. I was afraid of what Garrick would do if he discovered I was helping her, and my fear cost her 2 more years in that house. I have carried that far longer than I should have kept it quiet. Then come with me, Caleb said. Tell the summit what you saw. It won't undo what happened, but it will make sure nobody in that room can pretend it didn't. Delphine agreed without further hesitation, gathering only a small bag before leaving with Caleb that same afternoon. Back at the residence, Elena spent the day in careful, exhausting preparation. Ivy walked her through likely lines of questioning, warning her which council members were sympathetic and which had long-standing ties to Thorn territory that might color their judgment regardless of evidence presented. Alpha Renwick will likely push hardest against you, Ivy warned. He and Garrick fought alongside each other decades ago. Old loyalty runs deep in that generation, even when the facts don't support it. And if he doesn't believe me? Elena asked. Then we make sure the evidence doesn't require him to believe you alone, Ivy said. Delphine's testimony, the falsified records Caleb's investigators recovered, your mother's account, all of it stacks together, so that disbelieving you means disbelieving 4 separate sources at once. That becomes much harder for even a biased council member to dismiss cleanly. Elena absorbed this, steadying her breathing the way Grace had taught her during their morning training sessions. And Rhett? What happens when he speaks? He will try to make you the unstable one, Ivy said bluntly. Prepare for that. He will likely claim you were troubled before the marriage even began, that your running away was evidence of instability rather than survival. Do not let it rattle you. The moment you show anger, he will point to it as proof of his claims. Stay measured. Let the facts carry the weight, not your emotion. Elena nodded, though something cold settled in her stomach at the thought of sitting calmly, while Rhett tried, once again, to define who she was to a room full of strangers. That evening, Damon found her in the training yard alone, long after Grace had finished the day's lesson, still moving through defensive forms in the fading light, sweat clinging to her skin. You've been out here a while, he observed. I keep thinking if I move enough, the fear will tire out before I do, Elena admitted, breathing hard. It hasn't worked yet. Damon stepped closer, careful, unhurried. You don't have to not be afraid, Elena. You just have to speak anyway. Fear and courage aren't opposites. Most of the time, they're standing in the exact same room. Elena stopped moving, chest still heaving slightly, and looked at him properly for the first time since training had left her exhausted and raw. I keep thinking about the girl I was at 16, she said quietly. How small my voice was then. How nobody would have listened even if I'd screamed. Tomorrow I have to stand in a room and use that same voice, all these years later, and somehow trust that this time it will matter. It will matter, Damon said, closing the last of the distance between them, close enough now that she could feel the warmth radiating from him in the cooling evening air. Because this time, you are not standing there asking permission to be believed. You are standing there stating a fact, and daring anyone in that room to argue otherwise. Elena's breath caught, something shifting in the air between them, charged and quiet all at once. Damon, she said softly. I'm frightened. I know, he said. I would be more concerned if you weren't. She looked up at him, and for a moment neither of them moved, the space between them thin and fragile and full of something neither had yet named aloud. Thank you, she whispered, for all of this, for believing me before you had any proof at all. I didn't need proof to know cruelty when I read about it, Damon said quietly. I needed proof for the council, not for myself. Elena reached up, hesitant, and touched his jaw lightly, testing something she had not let herself want in years. Damon went very still beneath her touch, allowing her the choice of the moment fully. I don't know how to do this, she admitted, wanting something, trusting someone. It's been so long since I let myself consider it. Then we go slowly, Damon said, voice low and steady. There is no summit deadline on this, Elena. Only on tomorrow's hearing. This, whatever this becomes, we take at whatever pace you need. She nodded, something easing in her chest, grateful beyond words for a man who understood the difference between patience and hesitation. They stood together in the quiet yard as the last light faded from the sky, neither rushing toward anything neither was ready for, both simply present in a moment that felt, for the first time in a very long while, entirely safe. Tomorrow would bring the summit, the council, Rhett, Garrick, and every ghost Elena had spent 6 years running from. Tonight, there was only this, steady, unhurried, and quietly, carefully, becoming something real. The morning of the summit arrived gray and still, the kind of quiet that felt like the world was holding its breath along with her. Elena dressed in the plain, dark clothing Ivy had recommended. Nothing flashy, nothing that could be twisted into a narrative about vanity or performance. Just a woman, dressed simply, prepared to tell the truth. Nora found her in the hallway before she left, pressing a small parcel of food into her hands despite Elena's insistence she could not possibly eat. You'll want your strength, Nora said firmly, in a tone that did not accept argument. Whatever happens in that hall today, you eat something first. Fear runs better on a full stomach than an empty one, whatever it feels like. Elena managed a small, tired smile and took the parcel, tucking it away without eating, though the gesture steadied her more than the food would have. Grace and Ivy rode with her in the car, running through final preparations one last time. Delphine and Margaret would already be at the summit hall, having traveled ahead the previous evening under careful escort. Damon and Caleb rode separately, arriving through a different entrance entirely, a precaution Ivy insisted on to avoid drawing early attention to Elena's presence before the hearing formally began. The summit hall itself was larger than Elena expected, a wide circular chamber built from old stone, ringed with tiered seating where alphas from packs across the Northern Territories sat in careful, deliberate order, according to rank and alliance. At the center stood a raised platform where testimony would be given, exposed on all sides, nowhere to hide from the weight of dozens of watching eyes. Elena's stomach turned as she took her seat in the small antechamber reserved for those testifying, waiting for the proceedings to formally open. Through the thin wall, she could hear the low murmur of the gathering crowd, punctuated occasionally by a voice she recognized with a jolt of old, cold fear. Rhett Thorne was already there, speaking easily with several other alphas, his laugh carrying clearly through the wall, warm and practiced and utterly convincing to anyone who did not know what lay beneath it. Margaret sat beside her daughter in the antechamber, hands folded tightly in her lap. "He always did have that gift," she said quietly, following Elena's gaze toward the wall, making a room believe whatever he wanted them to believe. "Today that won't be enough," Delphine said firmly, from Elena's other side. "Today the room hears from people he never expected to speak at all." Elena appreciated the confidence in both their voices, even as her own nerves twisted tighter with every passing minute. She thought of Damon's words from the night before, fear and courage occupying the same room, and tried to let that steady her. The chamber doors opened precisely on schedule. Ivy escorted them to their designated seats near the front, and Elena caught sight of Damon already seated at the head of the council dais, composed, commanding, every inch the Alpha King the room expected him to be. He caught her eye briefly across the chamber and gave the smallest nod, a private reassurance meant only for her. The proceedings opened with formal declarations, the reading of the summit's purpose, acknowledgement of the parties present. Elena barely absorbed any of it, her focus narrowing until the world seemed to exist only in the space between her racing heartbeat and the moment she knew was coming. Then the presiding elder called the first name. "Rhett Thorne, you may present your opening statement." Rhett rose smoothly, adjusting his coat, and Elena felt every muscle in her body tense at the sound of his voice filling the chamber, calm and warm and utterly, dangerously convincing. "Honored Council," he began. 8 years ago, my family entered into a sacred alliance through marriage, an arrangement made with full respect for tradition and pack law. My wife, Elena, struggled with instability even before our union, a fact known to her own family. Rather than seek help within her marriage, she chose to abandon it, and now stands ready to tell this council a story crafted to punish a family who only ever tried to help her. The words landed exactly as smoothly as Elena had feared they would, and she felt several eyes in the chamber shift toward her, weighing, assessing, some already leaning toward belief in the version Rhett had just offered. Ivy's hand found Elena's beneath the table, a brief, steadying squeeze. "Stay measured," Ivy had told her. "Let the facts carry the weight." Elena breathed in slowly, forcing her racing pulse to steady, and reminded herself of everything she had survived, simply to reach this room. Rhett's words were smooth, practiced, convincing to anyone who had never lived inside that house. But she had lived inside that house, and today, for the first time in 8 years, she finally had the chance to say so, in a room that could no longer pretend not to hear her. The presiding elder's voice rang out again, calm and formal. "Elena Marsh, you may now present your testimony." Elena rose slowly, feeling every eye in the chamber turn toward her at once, the weight of it heavier than she had imagined, heavier than any nightmare had ever managed to convey. She glanced once toward Damon, found his steady, unwavering gaze waiting for her, and let it anchor her forward. She stepped onto the platform at the center of the room, exposed on all sides, and for one long, suspended moment, the entire chamber fell utterly silent, waiting to hear the truth she had carried alone for 8 long years. She opened her mouth to speak. "My name is Elena Marsh," she began, voice steadier than she expected, though her hands trembled slightly at her sides. 8 years ago, I was 16 years old. I did not choose my marriage. I was told, on the morning of the ceremony, that refusing was not an option available to me. I repeated vows I did not understand, in a language I had never been taught, because the elders who arranged it decided my consent was unnecessary to the process. A murmur passed through the chamber, quiet but audible. Elena kept her eyes forward, steadying herself the way Grace had trained her to steady her breathing under pressure. For 2 years, I lived in the Thorne household as Rhett's wife, she continued. I will not describe every detail of those 2 years today, because some of it is not for public record. But I will say this. I left not because I was unstable, and not because I misunderstood the honor I had supposedly been given. I left because staying meant I would not survive to see 19. Rhett shifted in his seat, his composed expression flickering for just a moment, before smoothing back into practiced calm. I ran at 18, Elena said. I built a life under a different name, because the law that bound me to that marriage also allowed my former husband's family to treat my leaving as abandonment of duty, punishable by detainment if I ever crossed Packland again. I have spent 6 years in hiding, not because I did something wrong, but because the law protected the people who hurt me instead of protecting me. She paused, letting the words settle into the silence of the chamber. I am not here today for revenge, she said. I am here because somewhere in this territory, there is another 16-year-old girl whose family is deciding, right now, that her future belongs to someone else. I am here so that when she runs, if she has to run, the law does not become one more weapon used against her. The presiding elder allowed a moment of silence before speaking. Do you have corroborating evidence to support your account, Miss Marsh? I do, Elena said, and gestured toward Ivy, who rose smoothly to present the falsified consent documents, altered medical records, and formal grievance filed against Elena for abandonment, laying each piece before the council with methodical precision. Then Delphine rose to testify, her voice shaking at first before steadying into quiet, devastating clarity as she described injuries she had treated during those 2 years, injuries that never appeared in any official record because Garrick Thorne had ensured they were erased. Finally, Margaret stood, and though her voice trembled throughout, she spoke plainly about the silence she had kept for 8 years, the fear that had governed her choices, and the shame she now carried for allowing it. I should have protected my daughter, Margaret said, her voice cracking. I did not. That failure belongs to me, and I will carry it for the rest of my life. But I will not compound it further by staying silent today. The chamber had gone entirely still by the time Margaret returned to her seat, the weight of 4 separate testimonies settling heavily over the room. Rhett rose again, visibly less composed now, his earlier easy warmth replaced by something sharper, more defensive. This is a coordinated attack, he said, voice rising slightly, orchestrated by rival packs seeking to weaken my family's standing through fabricated grievance. 4 independent testimonies, corroborated by falsified documents recovered from your own household's records, Damon interrupted, voice cutting cleanly through the chamber for the first time since proceedings began. Explain to this council, Rhett Thorne, how a coordinated fabrication produced medical evidence your family altered, using your own household seal. Rhett had no answer ready. For the first time since Elena had known of him, his composure cracked visibly in front of a room full of witnesses, and something in the chamber shifted palpably in response. Garrick Thorne, silent until now, rose slowly from his seat, his aged voice carrying the practiced authority of 4 decades of leadership. Honored council, he said, I built alliances that kept peace across this territory for 40 years. Whatever mistakes were made in a single marriage arrangement, do not erase the stability I have provided countless packs during that time. Stability built on silence is not stability, Damon said, rising fully now, his voice carrying the full weight of his authority through the chamber. It is simply cruelty that has not yet been exposed. This council exists to protect the packs beneath it, not merely to preserve the comfort of the powerful among us. Today, I am formally proposing the repeal of Pack Law Provision 12, Section 4, which permits marriage arrangements without documented verified consent from both parties, and I am proposing immediate protection for Elena Marsh from any further legal action tied to her departure from an arrangement she never willingly entered. The chamber erupted into low, urgent conversation, alphas turning to one another, weighing implications neither Elena nor Damon could fully control from this point forward. The presiding elder called for order, then addressed the room formally. This council will deliberate. A ruling will be delivered before the session closes today. Elena returned to her seat beside Margaret and Delphine, her whole body trembling now that the immediate pressure of testimony had passed, adrenaline draining out of her all at once. Margaret reached over hesitantly and took her daughter's hand, and this time, Elena did not pull away. Across the chamber, Damon caught her eye one final time before the council withdrew for deliberation, his expression unreadable to anyone else in the room but perfectly clear to her. You did it, his eyes said. Whatever happens now, you already did the hardest part. Elena held on to that thought as the chamber emptied around her, the weight of 8 years finally beginning to lift from her shoulders, even as the outcome of everything still hung, uncertain, in the hands of a council that had never once overturned tradition in 300 years. The deliberation took 3 hours. Elena spent it pacing a small side room with Margaret and Delphine, unable to sit still, unable to eat despite Nora's parcel still sitting untouched in her bag. Grace stayed near the door, silent and steady, a quiet reassurance simply through her presence. When the summons finally came to return to the chamber, Elena's legs felt unsteady beneath her, though she forced herself to walk in with her head level, refusing to let fear be the last thing this room saw from her. The chamber had filled again, every seat occupied, the air thick with anticipation. Damon stood at the head of the council dais, his expression composed but his eyes finding Elena's the moment she entered, steady and unwavering. The presiding elder rose to deliver the ruling. After careful deliberation, the elder began, voice carrying clearly through the silent chamber. This council finds the testimony presented today, corroborated by physical evidence and multiple independent witnesses, to be credible and compelling. The marriage entered into by Elena Marsh at 16 years of age is hereby declared void, having lacked the documented consent required under even the oldest interpretations of pack law. A wave of quiet reaction moved through the chamber, but Elena barely registered it, focused entirely on the elder's continuing words. Furthermore, this council formally repeals Provision 12, Section 4, effective immediately across all territories represented here today. Marriage arrangements henceforth require verified, independent consent from both parties, with meaningful consequence for any pack found circumventing this requirement. Elena's breath caught, her eyes filling despite her effort to remain composed. Finally, the elder continued, the grievance filed against Elena Marsh for abandonment of pack duty is hereby dismissed in full, and this council formally denounces any further attempt by Thorn Pack leadership to pursue detainment or retribution against her. Any such attempt will be treated as a direct violation of summit law, subject to immediate sanction. The chamber broke into murmured reaction, some alphas nodding in evident approval, others exchanging uncertain glances, clearly recalculating old alliances in light of what had just occurred. Garrick Thorne sat rigid and silent, his composure finally, completely broken. Rhett stared at the floor, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Elena stood frozen for a long moment, the weight of 8 years lifting all at once. So suddenly it nearly buckled her knees. Margaret's hand found hers again, steadying her, and Delphine's quiet presence beside her grounded her further. It was over. After 8 years, it was finally, completely over. The chamber emptied slowly afterward, alphas filing out in low conversation, already discussing the implications of the ruling across their own territories. Elena remained near her seat, unable yet to fully process the enormity of what had just happened, when Damon approached, having finally stepped down from the council dais. "You did that," he said quietly, standing before her now without the formal distance the summit had required. "Every bit of that belonged to you. I only opened the door. You were the one who walked through it." Elena laughed, a shaky, disbelieving sound, tears finally spilling freely now that the pressure of testimony had passed. "I don't know how to feel right now. Relieved, terrified, something else I don't have a word for yet." "That sounds about right," Damon said gently. "Freedom rarely arrives feeling simple, not after carrying something this heavy for this long." Margaret approached hesitantly, and Elena turned to her, still uncertain, still healing, but no longer entirely closed off either. "Thank you for coming today," Elena said. "I don't know yet what happens between us, but I'm glad you were here." "That's more than I hoped for," Margaret said, voice thick with emotion. "Whatever comes next, I'll take it. Slowly, if that's what you need." Elena nodded, something tentative and new settling into place between them. Not forgiveness yet, but the fragile beginning of something that might grow into it, given time. Weeks passed. Elena did not return to her old apartment above the bakery, choosing instead to remain in Ashfall, building a new life openly for the first time in 6 years, no longer needing to hide behind a borrowed name. She found work at a small clinic, using skills she had quietly developed helping Delphine during their preparation for the summit, discovering an unexpected talent for the work. Damon remained exactly as steady as he had been from the beginning, present without pressure, patient without hesitation, allowing whatever was growing between them the time it needed to become real. Slowly, evening by evening, conversation by conversation, Elena found herself trusting him with pieces of herself she had kept guarded for years. One evening, months after the summit, They sat together on the same terrace where so much of their story had unfolded, watching the sun set over the training yard where Elena still practiced most mornings, no longer out of fear, but out of the simple satisfaction of feeling strong in her own body again. "Do you ever think about the girl who ran through the woods that night?" Damon asked quietly. "The one who collapsed at the pack border and cried until she had nothing left." "Every day," Elena admitted, "but not the way I used to. I used to think about her like she was someone I needed to leave behind completely, someone weak I had to outrun. Now I think about her differently. She's the reason I'm still here at all. She's the one who ran, so that this version of me could eventually stand still." Damon reached over, gently taking her hand, and this time Elena did not hesitate before lacing her fingers through his. "I'm proud of both of you," he said softly. "The girl who ran, and the woman who finally stopped." Elena leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder, feeling something settle fully into place inside her chest, for the first time in longer than she could remember. The law had changed. The truth had finally been spoken aloud, in a room that could no longer pretend not to hear it. And somewhere in the quiet space between survival and healing, Elena Marsh had found something she never expected to find again after that night in the barn 8 years ago. She had found herself, and, unexpectedly, gently, she had found someone willing to stand beside the woman she had become, rather than the girl she had once been forced to be. It was not a perfect ending. Healing rarely is, but it was, at long last, a true beginning.